right?
I think so, yeah. I love that channel, by the way. I started watching it that first night you were talking about. You're right. It's really good. I like it too, Pete. Is that right? Did I remember the correct name?
I don't know.
It'd be a miracle.
Well, if you do find a link, drop it in there.
Yeah, I want to find a link for this so
Uh,
so I can share this guys with you.
Because like the AM, yeah, that's something I'm looking for is like some new channels, like new experiences, new content to look at.
I don't think that's it.
No,
Let's
I don't
see.
think that's it either.
That's not it. It's something in other entertainment. Or is it? Maybe. Well, let's see. I'm trying to look, Pete.
Yeah, this is the part of the show where we try to remember something so I can tell you guys about
Yeah.
it.
Fun part of the show.
um,
Oh, crap. Can't think of it either. I
I'm
don't
gonna
think
find it.
I
I'm
didn't
gonna find
remember
it.
it correctly. Boy, somebody's got a plane getting ready to crash on them.
Hats off entertainment.
Oh, okay. Hats off.
Hats off entertainment. Hats off entertainment, everybody. I'm gonna share the link in the chat for you all.
Hell yeah!
Brand new channel for you guys to check out. Really good stuff. Really well done, like mini documentaries about people like Chris Farley or the Three Stooges. Those two really stood out to me. Movies that are almost cult classics like King Ralph, starring John Goodman. Really, really thoughtful channel. Yeah, really good stuff. They got about 32,000 subscribers. I highly recommend you subscribe to them. They were talking about the sequels to Christmas Story. So they did a video about that.
Yeah.
Okay, dude, I know this is a good choice because the first thing I hear when I click on the link and go to hit the subscribe button is Jim Varney. I hear Ernest P. Worrell. I'm like, all right, this is a good channel. Click.
Yeah, it's good. I listened to like about 10 of his videos so far. I enjoy it thoroughly. And you're right, it is very well done. He did a lot of good editing, examples of everything he's talking about.
Home run. His Three Stooges one got me. Like his Three Stooges one, I felt that. I felt
like
that
it too.
Stooges.
A lot. I guess I think that at night and the next day, I was listening to it every time I was sitting down out here. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's really nice to find a new channel.
Especially being home bored. Good stuff.
Yeah, hats off entertainment. Look at this set for all. Good. Okay.
Still coming in. That's good.
So yeah, let's get towards the topic though. Before we begin, please don't hesitate to hit that thumbs up button. Really do appreciate it. Thank you if you are while you're here. And if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. And don't hesitate to share this out on social media. Let's see if we can get a few more people in here tonight. It's always a pleasure.
YouTube's no help.
To share this. YouTube's YouTube. Word of mouth is really how you grow. So thank you for that in advance. Tonight's topic, the amazing Knights Templar, as written by David Hatcher Childress, extracted from The History of the Knights Templar, New Dawn number 40 and 41, January, February, and March, April 1997, the New Dawn magazine website. Knights Templar have been associated with all sorts of incredibly activities, including having the Ark of the Covenant, Holy Grail, a secret fleet that sailed the oceans, and the awe-inspiring self-confidence and courage that made their enemies shudder in fear. Despite their fierce and battle-hardened reputation, the Knights Templar were learned men, dedicated to protecting travelers and pilgrims of all religions, not just Christians. They were great statesmen, politically adept, economic traders, and were apparently allied with the great sailor fraternity that had created a worldwide trading empire in Phoenician times. Despite a great deal of negative propaganda against the Templars at the time of their suppression, They are still known today as the preservers of knowledge and sacred objects. While the origin of the Knights Templar are said to go back to the building of King Solomon's Temple by Phoenician masons from Tyre, or even the Great Pyramids in Atlantis, we trace their modern history from the Crusades period of the Middle Ages. The Knights Templar began when a group of 9 French knights came to Jerusalem in the year 1118 AD. These knights petitioned the king of Jerusalem to allow them to live in the ancient Temple of Solomon, then partially a mosque and partially in ruins. In his book, Mysteries of the Cartharis Cathedral, the French architect Louis Carpentier claimed that the Knights Templar built Cartharis as a repository for ancient wisdom. The repository is equal to Stonehenge, the Temple of Solomon, or the Great Pyramid of Egypt. He further claimed that special knowledge about the temple in Jerusalem was gained by the founding group of 9 knights who lived at Solomon's Temple starting in 1118 AD. In that year, it is historically recorded that 9 French knights presented themselves to a Christian King Baldwin II of Jerusalem and explained that they planned to form themselves into a company with a plan for protecting pilgrims from robbers and murderers along the public highways leading to the Holy City. King Baldwin II had been a prisoner of the Saracens and knew of their infighting. Factions such as the Assassins were active in politics. They also asked to be housed within a wing of the palace, a wing which happened to be adjacent to the Dome of the Rock Mosque, which is built on the site of Solomon. The king granted their request and order of the Knights of Solomon's Temple, the Knights Templars. 10 years later, the 9 knights presented themselves to the Pope, who gave his official approval to the Knights Templar. Although only 9 mysteriously knights existed, a 10th joined them, who was the Count of Champagne, an important French noble. In fact, none of the poor knights was apparently poor, nor were they all French. Several came from important French and Flemish families. Of the 10 original knights, 4 have not been identified, although their names are known. Furthermore, it is unlikely that the Knights of the Temple Solomon were formed to protect pilgrims to Jerusalem, because such an order of knights already existed. They were the Knights Hospitaliers, or the Knights of St. John, later become the Knights of Malta. It is important not to confuse the Knights Templar with the Knights of Malta, as many readers and some historians do. The Knights Templar are quite different from the other Crusaders, and were sometimes said to fight in combat against each other, even in the Holy Land. The Knights Hospitaliers, which still exist today as the Knights of Malta, were forced to leave Malta behind, who stopped at the island on his way to Egypt. Today, the Knights of Malta reside in Italy, still have their own sovereign country, and are said to be a secret society for the Vatican. Charles Addison, a London lawyer, who wrote in his 1842 book, The History of the Knights Templar, mentions in the first few pages how it was commonly believed the Templars were both at odds with the Vatican and their military arm, the Knights Hospitaliers. Addison denies the rumor, but admits such rumors existed. Carpenter likened the original band of Knights Templar to commandos who raided the ancient Temple of Solomon in order to uncover its engineering secrets, possible to lost treasure such as the Ark of the Covenant, possibly hidden deep in a strange cavern system beneath the temple. With the help of the brilliant French abbot Bernard de Chaillot, the 9 knights, directed by the Count of Champagne, created the Knights Templar. With the money that they accumulated, the cathedral at Chartres was built. Later, other cathedrals were built around Europe, and legends of the master stonemasons became common. Incorporated into the Chartres Cathedral are beautiful stained glass windows, many of the colors difficult or impossible to duplicate today. Hidden within the cathedral are various ancient cubits of measure, plus such esoteric devices as the famous Chartres maze, and other visual tools such as sacred geometry for personal transformation, sort of personal alchemy of the soul. Included in the image was the quest for the Holy Grail. When a nobleman would join their ranks, he would surrender his castle and property to the knights, who would use the revenue generated from his property to purchase weapons, war horses, armor, and other military supplies. The ranks of the Knights Templar grew rapidly. Other noblemen and kings who were not members often gave them gifts of money and land. King Stephen of England contributed his valuable English manor of Sersing in Essex. He also made arrangements for high-ranking members of the Knights to visit nobles of England and Scotland. Pope Eugenius decreed that the Knights Templar and only the Knights Templar would wear the special red cross with blunt wedge-shaped arms called the cross pate on the left breast of their white robes, so they could be quickly recognized at any time by Christians and by other Templars on the battlefield. The white robes with red crosses became their required dress. The warrior knights fought bravely in the Middle East and were highly respected by their counterparts for their strategy and bravery. In 1129, the Temple Grand Master, Hughes de Paynes, led a company of 300 knights, recruited from the noblest houses of Europe, to accompany a huge train of pilgrims to Jerusalem. During this time, the Templars formed part of a contingent which, allied with the assassins of Persia, tried to take the important city of Damascus. According to Archon Darul, sorry, in his book, A History of Secret Societies, the followers of Hassan ibn Sabah, leader of the assassins, were definitely in contact with the Templars, and apparently the assassins were prepared to become Christians should their goals be met, which they were not. At one point, a payment of 3,000 gold pieces from the Syrian branch of the assassins was made to the Templar order, apparently as some form of tribute. The exact association between the Templars and the assassins is remained a mystery. The Templars, it must be said in this regard, were not noted for political assassinations as were the assassins. Rather, the Templars fell victim to political intrigue and were either publicly executed or assassinated, as was Henry Sinclair, Grand Master of the Templars, in 1401. The Templar fleet returned to North America. Many Templars spoke perfect Arabic and were familiar with every religious sect, cult, and magical doctrine, including the assassins. For instance, the Grand Master Philip of Nablus, 1167 AD, was a Syrian. The assassins, it might be mentioned, eventually became known what is today as the Ismaili sect of Islam. Their head is the Aga Khan, and their followers reside largely in Pakistan and India. The Aga Khan, a hereditary leadership, maintains residence in both London and Bombay. The father of today is Aga Khan, who was married to Hollywood actress Rita Hayworth. By 1133, King Alfonso of Aragon and Navarre, northern Spain, had fought the invaders, the Moors, in 29 battles, and willed his kingdom to the Templars. However, the Templars were prevented from claiming the kingdom because of the Moorish victory over Spain. Meanwhile, there was a parallel religious order, the Knights of St. John, founded in Amalfi, Italy, in the 11th century. They went to Jerusalem to protect and minister to the Christian pilgrims, but soon extended their mission to tending to the sick and poor all over the Holy Land. As the years went by, the Knights of St. John became increasingly militant, generally speaking, fought alongside the more mystical Knights Templar and the Germanic order of the Teutonic Knights of St. Mary. With the fall of Jerusalem in 1309, the Knights of St. John retreated to Cyprus and then to Rhodes as the main base for the Crusaders in their struggle against the Ottoman Empire. Rhodes was a fortress, a prison, and a supply base for ships and armies on their way to Palestine and Asia Minor. When the Ottoman Sultan Mehmet failed to clarify the succession question of the newly powerful Ottoman Empire in 1481, a battle between his two sons of Bursa resulted, and Kem was defeated by his brother Bayezid. Kem fled to Egypt, but was denied asylum by the Mameluks, who controlled that country for the Ottomans. Kem took the irreversible step of fleeing to Rhodes, where he appealed to the arch-enemies of the Ottomans, the Knights Hospitaliers, or the Knights of St. John, with his brother, now in the hands of the Crusader army. Bayezid knew he was in trouble, and the Ottoman Empire had to respond quickly. Bayezid shrewdly contacted the Knights of St. John and negotiated a contract to pay 40,000 ducats of gold annually, a huge sum at the time, in return for imprisonment of his brother on Rhodes, and later in the English Tower at a castle in Bodrum on the Turkish mainland. The Knights eventually handed their valuable prisoner over to the Vatican, where Kem was made an interesting offer to lead a Crusader army to recapture Istanbul, Constantinople. To stop this final threat from his wayward brother, Bayezid spared no expense, paying to the Vatican 120,000 gold ducats and a number of sacred relics from Jerusalem, including the famous Spear of Destiny. I want to stop there for a moment and talk about how there's been a lot of teasing in here. A lot of teasing going on about the Holy Grail.
Mm-hmm.
About a Templar fleet returning from the Americas.
Okay.
And now the Sword of the Spear of Destiny, rather. Spear of Destiny's coming into play. The Spear of Destiny's on the chessboard now.
All right.
It always has been. It's just known.
It's a good way to look at it. It's a very good way to look at it.
Well, it's like all the pieces are coming out of the woodworks. Like we're finding the lost civilizations, the lost monuments, Spirit Destiny's on the board again. We got all these artifacts that just are manifesting like seemingly at random, just cosmic alignments, everything else that are going on at the same time. It's a good time, good time to see all this stuff happening. Like, there's a lot of this history, like a lot of what's been written over the ages, like we're seeing like the manifestations of it in our age, like the end products.
Spear of Destiny.
Yeah.
Also known as the Lance of Longinus, reportedly was the spearhead of the Roman centurion Longinus that was used to pierce the side of Jesus while on the cross. Another artifact offered was the Sponge of the Last Refreshment. This was the vinegar-like sponge used to wet Jesus' lips while on the cross. According to the legend of the Lance, whosoever possesses the Holy Lance and understands its power it serves, holds in his hands the destiny of the world for good reason. The German leader believed in this power and removed the lance from the Vienna Museum when the Germans took over Austria. With this hefty payment, the Pope abandoned Kem and their plans for him to lead any army against Istanbul. Kem died alone in Terracina prison in 1495. Rumor had it that he was eventually poisoned. Today, Kem is but a footnote in history, a victim of the diplomatic maneuvers that had brought the Spear of Destiny to the West. The Knights stayed on the roads for 213 years, transforming the city into a mighty fortress with 12-meter-thick walls. They withstood two Muslim offenses in 1444 and 1480. In 1522, the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent staged a massive attack with 200,000 troops. A mere 600 knights, with 1,000 mercenaries and 6,000 Rhodesians, eventually surrendered after a long siege. In 1529, Charles V, grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, offered Malta to the Knights of St. John as their permanent base as they began to build fortifications around the Grand Harbor. In 1565, the Ottoman fleet arrived at Malta and immediately attacked the fortifications. With 181 ships carrying a complement of over 30,000 men, the fleet bombarded the fortress with over 7,000 rounds of ammunition every day for over a month, and finally took St. Elmo. The Turkish Marines had suffered many casualties and could not take the other heavily defended forts that were around the bay and inside the island. News of reinforcements coming from Sicily caused the Turks to retreat from the island, and the Great Siege was over. The Knights of St. John changed their names to the Knights of Malta and were said to be fanatically loyal to the Vatican. And then the Pope apparently used them as his personal crusaders and soldiers. Other orders, such as the Knights Templar and the Teutonic Knights, were far more independent, and if anything, tried their best to subvert the church that was centered on Rome. In fact, it was sometimes said that the Knights Templar and the Knights of St. John, later to be known as the Knights of Malta, sometimes fought in combat against each other. The Knights Templar were sworn to fight the Vatican, while the Knights of Malta became the Pope's private army. The Knights then turned to the Russian Tsar Paul I, who offered to found an Orthodox League of the Knights of St. James to deal with the Russian Tsar, particularly enraged Napoleon. Napoleon sailed to Malta and made anchor just outside of the Grand Harbor in June of 1798. When he was refused entry by the Knights of St. John, he began to bombard the fortress. After 2 days of shelling, the French landed and gave the Knights 4 days to leave. thus ending their 268-year presence in the island. The Pope restored the office of the Grand Master in 1879, and the Knights of St. John still exist today. They are known as the Knights of Malta, though they no longer reside in Malta at all, but have offices in various cities in Europe. Even though they have no actual territory, they are still recognized as a separate state by 40 or more countries around the world, similar to the recognition of the Vatican. Critics of the Knights of St. John in Malta claim they are a right-wing Catholic organization that worked in Eastern Europe to suppress non-Catholic ethnic groups. What else? The Sea Empire of the Knights Templar. During the 180 years of Crusade, the Templars' wealth grew into a huge fortune. They owned over 9,000 manors and castles across Europe, all of which were tax-free. Each property was farmed and produced revenue that were used to support the largest banking system in the world. Templar wealth and power caused suspicion and jealousy among some members of European nobility. Slanderous rumors were spread of secret rituals and devil worship. King Philip IV of France was responsible for many of these rumors. Philip IV had taken refuge of an angry mob in Paris at the Templar headquarters there. The Templars had moved their main headquarters from Jerusalem to Paris after the Crusaders' defeat in the eastern Mediterranean. The Ottoman Navy had taken over most of the Mediterranean and were busy besieging the Knights Hospitaliers on Malta. The Templars gave Philip IV refuge from the mob, but it is said the king saw the magnificence of the Templar treasure and wanted it for himself. His nation was bankrupt. He was a weak king who was unpopular with the people, and he knew that the Templars were more powerful and wealthy than he was. So King Philip IV went to Rome in 1305 and convinced Pope Clement V that the Knights Templar were not the holy defenders of the faith, but were seeking to destroy it. The Pope ordered King Philip to arrest the Knights in France and begin an inquisition. When the king's men went to the Templar castles, they found many of them abandoned, and a large naval force that had been anchored at the Templar base in La Rochelle was gone. Those that were arrested and tried and found guilty of sin against God. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, was burned at the stake in Paris in 1314. The contemporary English poem asked the questions that many ask today. Where did all the Templars and their great wealth go? The brethren, the masters of the temple, who were well stocked and ample with gold and silver riches, where are they? How have they done? They had such power roots that no one dared take them. None was so bold. Forever they bought and never sold. The questions plague historians and treasure hunters for centuries. For hundreds of years, there have been rumors the Knights Templar were not only the defenders of the faith, but were also guardians of the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is said to be the most holy of religious artifacts. Different versions of the legend exist, with the two most prominent stating the Holy Grail is the copper chalice used by Christ at the Last Supper, or a piece of the cross that he was crucified. The chalice version of the Holy Grail has St. Joseph of Arimathea bringing to England the cup used at the Last Supper, which had been used to collect the blood that flowed from Christ's wounds. The Welsh version of the Grail story states St. Joseph of Arimathea brought the Grail to England with the word of Christ, and left the holy relic at Glastonbury. There it reached King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. The Grail is said to have taken many forms, and King Arthur saw it in its fifth and final form while receiving communion with hermits, a bleeding lance, which is also known as the Lance of Longinus, which was discovered by the Crusaders at Antioch. The last version will put the Templars and the lance in the Middle East at the same time. Before leaving the legend of the Holy Grail, stop and think about the religious significance such a relic would have. The mysterious Knights Templar had an extensive sea network and may have inherited some of the maps and other secrets of the Phoenicians. When the Templars were outlawed and arrested in 1307 by King Philip IV of France, the huge Templar fleet at La Rochelle, France vanished, and many Templars sought refuge and remained outside of France. Portugal was one of the few places where they could find asylum, and it is likely the Templar fleet made a stop at Almora Castle before continuing to its final destination. It should be noted that many Portuguese explorers and royalty were Knights Templar and later Masons. Many believe that the Portuguese Knights Templar were instrumental in Portugal acquiring its transatlantic colony, Brazil. While Portugal was an important haven for the Knights Templar, their main base of operations until they were outlawed was southern France and Catalonia, in the area of the Cathars and the Merovingian kings. Barcelona, capital of Catalonia, was originally a Phoenician port and these areas along the border of Spain and France had long thought of itself as Cataluna, a state, people, and culture separate from the rest of Spain. The populace speaks their own language, Catalonian, a language that may have originated with ancient Phoenician. Outside of Barcelona is Montserrat Monastery, site of a religious pilgrimage for a long time, possibly going back to even before the Christian era. It is a mountain rising 4,054 feet above the coastal plain, which eventually became the site of a celebrated Benedictine monastery. It was at Montserrat that St. Ignatius of Loyola vowed to dedicate himself to a religious life. The monastery can be found about halfway up a steep barren mountain. Only ruins can be found in the 11th century Benedictine monastery, and the new monastery in this site was built in the 19th century. According to the Columbia Viking Descans in 1968, Montserrat was carved in the Middle Ages to have been the site of the castle which contained the hall. Says the encyclopedia, the Renaissance church contains a black wooden image of the Virgin, carved, according to tradition, by St. Luke. In the Middle Ages, the mountain, also called Mont Salvat, was thought to have been the site of a castle in the Holy Grail. Curiously, Barcelona is the city where Columbus landed upon his return to Europe and the New World. Why did Columbus come all the way to Barcelona when he had left from Cadiz? He thought that he had to pass on his way to Barcelona. Perhaps Barcelona was a safer port to land at than Cadiz. This is quite possible that Columbus was a Knights Templar. He always signed his name with a curious triangle and coded letters, something which Knights Templar were known to do. At this point, all Jewish people had been banned from Spain on the very day Columbus had sailed for the New World. Some historians claim that Columbus was actually a Spanish Jew and not an Italian who generalized later historians would claim. Columbus was Jewish, perhaps Barcelona and Cataluna area were a safe haven for him and his court. Also Barcelona would have been likely a high city for the Grand Master, or highly likely city for the secret Grand Master of the Knights Templar to reside in. One of the most interesting and mysterious of Scottish characters was Prince Henry Sinclair, one of the last kings of the Orkney Islands. Henry Sinclair, like many other nobles in the Middle Ages, held many titles and was many kings. He was king of the Orkney Islands, although they were officially an earldom granted to Prince Henry, the King of Norway. At the same time, Prince Henry held other territories as vassal of the Scottish king. Prince Henry Sinclair was also a Grand Master of the Knights Templar, a veteran of the Crusades, and according to some sources, the possessor of the Holy Grail. In the year 1391 AD, Prince Henry Sinclair met with the famous explorers and mapmakers Nicholas and Antonio Zeno at Fair Island, which is located between the Orkneys and the Shetlands. The Zeno brothers were well known for their maps of Iceland and the Arctic. Prince Henry would contact them and send them on an expedition fleet to the New World. With the aid of funding from the Knights Templar, who had now been banished by the Pope, Prince Henry gathered a fleet of 12 ships for a voyage to establish a safe haven for the Order of Knights and their treasure. The party was led by Prince Harry under the guidance of Antonio Zeno, the mapmaker from Venice. The fleet left the Orkneys in 1398 and landed in Nova Scotia, wintered there, and later explored the eastern seaboard of the United States. It was said that the effigy of one of Henry's close companions, Sir James Gunn, who died in the expedition, is to be found carved upon a rock face in Westford, Massachusetts. The party is said to have built a castle and left a portion of their navy in Nova Scotia. As we shall see, the famous Oak Island, just off the mainland of Nova Scotia, is to become a part of the mystery surrounding Prince Henry Sinclair. Prince Henry and his fleet returned to the Orkneys, but soon afterwards, Prince Henry was assassinated in Scotland. The year was 1400, and it was another 92 years before Christopher Columbus, known to us as Columbus, was to use his knowledge of Iceland and the Zeno brothers' maps to make his famous voyage across the Atlantic. In his book, Holy Grail Across the Atlantic, Michael Bradley attempts to show the ancient treasure of the Temple of Solomon was kept in Montségur in the French Pyrenees, the Cathar region of France. This mountain fortress was besieged by the forces of Simon de Montfort and the Inquisition on March 16, 1244. It is believed that the secret treasure escaped. The treasure probably included both ancient treasures of the Middle East, but also gold, silver, and jewelry of more modern manufacture. Knights Templar were well funded by secret and various royalty. After all, the Merovingian kings were of the holy blood of Jesus, or so it was thought. Bradley asserts that Prince Henry took over as many as 300 colonists to the New World, and a literal grail cask was built in Nova Scotia, New Scotland. So strong is evidence for Prince Henry Sinclair's voyage to the Atlantic with the Knights Templar, that his distant relative Andrew Sinclair wrote a book called The Sword and the Grail, in which he claimed much the same as Bradley in the Holy Grail across the Atlantic. The Templars may have come into the possession of some highly accurate maps made by the Moors and Turks, in doing so inheriting the secret sea knowledge once guarded so carefully by the Carthaginians and their allies. Bradley and Sinclair claimed that a special Grail castle was built in an area of central Nova Scotia called the Cross. This spot would be reached via a river from either side of Nova Scotia Peninsula. At the mouth of both rivers was an island called Oak Island. Curiously, one of the Oak Islands had the famous Money Pit, which is a man-made shaft hundreds of feet deep with side tunnels. It is believed that there is a treasure in this pit, and millions of dollars have been spent in attempts to reach the submerged bottom of the pit. It is traditionally believed that the Oak Island Money Pit was built by pirates to hide treasure. Bradley and Sinclair claimed it was built by Sinclair and the Knights Templar. Furthermore, Canada was settled as a direct result of the Holy Grail being taken. Sinclair and the Templars were attempting to create the prophesized New Jerusalem in the New World. New Jerusalem in the New World. And Francis Bacon.
Good old Francis Bacon.
So, the final stand of the Knights Templar. The Lost Templar fleet is discussed in Michael Baggagen and Richard Lee's book, The Temple and the Lodge. They point out that the Templars had a huge fleet at their disposal. This fleet that was stationed out of ports in Mediterranean France and Italy, as well as ports in northern France, Flanders, and Portugal. On the whole, the Templar fleet was geared towards operations in the Mediterranean, keeping the Holy Land supplied with men and equipment, and importing commodities from the Middle East into Europe. At the same time, the fleet did operate in the Atlantic. Extensive trade was conducted with the British Isles, and very probably with the Baltic Hanseatic League. Thus, communities subordinated to the Templars, called the Preceptories in Europe, in England and Ireland, were generally located on the coast or on navigable rivers. The primary Atlantic port for the Templars was La Rochelle, which had good communication with Mediterranean ports. Cloth, for example, could be brought from Britain on Templar ships to La Rochelle, transported overland to a Mediterranean port such as Cagliari, and then loaded aboard Templar ships again and carried to the Holy Land. By this means, it was possible to avoid the always risky passage through the Straits of Gibraltar, usually controlled by the Saracens. The order was persecuted by Philip IV of France, starting in 1307 and culminating in the burning at the stake of Jacques Molay in 1314. The Knights Templar became an outlaw organization. Philip IV of France persecuted them because of their financial and political power, but to many historians, the persecution was part of a continued campaign against early Christian heretics like the Cathars. Indeed, there is a great deal of evidence to show the Knights Templar and the Cathars were strongly allied. The Knights Templar was apparently part of a secret movement to restore the Merovingian kings, who had the holy blood of Jesus in their veins. The question is, what happened to the Templar fleet after they were outlawed? Traditional history has no answer to this question. Baggagen and Ray in The Temple and the Lodge claim that the Templar fleet escaped en masse from the various ports in the Mediterranean and northern Europe and left for a mysterious destination where they could find political asylum and safety. This destination was Scotland. The Mediterranean fleet had to sail through the dangerous Straits of Gibraltar and then probably stopped at various Portuguese ports that were very sympathetic to the Templars, such as Almoroa Castle near the town of Abrantes. The fort of Almoroa was constructed at Galgan Pass, master of the Order of the Templars since 1171. Baggagen and Lee go on to say the Templar fleet sailed up the west coast of Ireland with safe ports in Donegal and Donegal and Ulster. The Templar properties were located and arms smuggled to Argyll. Templar fleet then landed in Argyll. I hope I'm saying that right. By sailing to the south of the islands of Uslay and Jura, to the south of Jura, where the Templars unloaded men and cargo at the Scottish Templar strongholds of Kilroy, Castle Sweet, and Kilmarnock. Robert the Bruce controlled the ports of Scotland, but not all of it. Significant portions of the north and southern highlands were controlled by clans that were allied with England. Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated by the Pope in 1306, 1 year before the persecution of his empire. Essentially, the papal decree that outlawed the Knights Templar was not applicable in Scotland, or at least in parts of Robert the Bruce control. The turning of the tide for Robert the Bruce, Scotland, and the Knights Templar was the famous Battle of Bannockburn, which took place on June 24, 1324. While visiting Scotland, I drove out to Edinburgh to look at the site of the Battle of Bannockburn. It was noted to take place within 2.5 miles of Stirling Castle. June 24th of 1324, Robert the Bruce of Scotland, with approximately 6,000 Scots, miraculously defeated 20,000 English soldiers. Exactly what took place has never really been reported. It was believed by some that Bruce did it with a special force of the Knights Templar. After all, June 24th was also a special day for the Knights Templar as it was St. John's Day. Says Bijin and Leah. Most historians concur. The Scottish army was made up almost entirely of foot soldiers armed with pikes, spears, and axes. They also concur that not only mounted men in the Scottish ranks carried swords, and that Bruce had few such men. Suddenly, in the midst of the battle, the English forces engaged in 3-1 combat against the Scottish soldiers. When a charge from the rear of the Scottish camp, a fresh force with banners flying rode forth to do battle with the English. The English ranks took one look at this new force and in sheer terror of the new combatants, literally fled the field, save Bannigan and Lee and the Temple and the Lodge. After a day of combat, which had left both the English and Scottish armies exhausted, panic swept the English ranks. King Edward, together with 500 of his knights, abruptly fled the field. Demoralized, the English foot soldiers promptly followed suit, and the withdrawal deteriorated quickly into full-scale rout. The entire English army abandoning their supplies, their baggage, their money, their gold, their silver, plate, their arms, their armor, and equipment. And while the chronicles speak of dreadful slaughter, the reported English losses do not in fact appear to have been very great. Only 1 earl is reported killed. Only 38 barons and knights. The English collapse appears to have been caused not by the ferocity of the Scottish assault, which were managing to withstand, but simply by fear. The fact was, what probably happened was a charge by the remaining forces of the Knights Templar against the English army. These crusade veterans were like Green Berets or special forces in the Middle Ages. All combatants suddenly stopped to witness the charging army of the Knights Templar in full regalia with white banners and red crosses insignias flying high above the mounted Grail Knights. The probable strategy behind the Templars' charge into battle would have been to ride through the thick of battle and attempt to reach King Edward and his personal guard. Once engaged with the commanding forces of the English foe, the seasoned war veterans would have easily defeated King Edward's knights, possibly killed the king himself. As noted, King Edward and his special knights immediately fled upon witnessing the Templar charge. In 1995, Oscar-winning movie Braveheart concluded by depicting Robert the Bruce and his charge at Bannockburn. My friend Laurel Fanthorpe, back in Wales, had told me that I should visit Rosslyn Chapel while I was near Edinburgh. I headed south from Bannockburn battle area. It was just about noon when I arrived at Rosslyn Chapel in the Lothlorien hills south of Edinburgh. I parked the car and walked around a small but ornate chapel. It was Sunday. There was a church service going on inside. So I looked at some of the graves in the cemetery on the west side of the building. When the service finished, a tall, thin man in a tweed sport coat came up to the chapel and stood in the courtyard for a moment. "Excuse me," I said to him, "but isn't Rosslyn Chapel associated with the Knights Templar?" "Oh, yes, indeed," the man said. "The chapel was built by by William St. Clair, Grand Master of the Templars." We stood there for a moment talking about the chapel and the Knights Templar, and he told me he had written several books on Rosslyn, the Knights Templar, the Holy Grail, and the Spear of Destiny. I co-wrote The Mark of the Beast with Trevor Ravenscroft, he said. Put these other books for sale in the chapel bookshop. I've read Mark of the Beast, and I said, "Are you Tim Wallace Murphy?" "Indeed I am." A bit surprised that I knew who he was and read the books. Pleasure reading this. And we talked a bit about the Battle of Bannockburn, since I had just come from the area of the battlefield. The charge of the Knights Templar at Bannockburn must have been quite a sight, I said. Were any of the knights killed? Not a one, he said. The English fled in total fear of the seasoned warriors. Not even one Knights Templar was killed. Well, that's the kind of statistic I like, I said. Privately, I wondered if this battle was the reciprocal battle to the last stand of the Cathars at Mont Segur. At Mont Segur, everyone had been killed. At Bannockburn, the Grail Knights had triumphed, and not a man was lost. Dr. Tim Wallace Murphy took me to a gift shop, where he showed me his other books on Rosslyn Chapel and its history. He also told me the story of Rosslyn, which is connected to the Orkneys, and the taking of the Holy Grail of North America. The builder of Rosslyn Chapel, William St. Clair, was the last Sinclair Jarl of Orkney, who lived in the middle of the 15th century. Master Earl William, the Jarldom of Orkney, passed from the family to the Scottish crown as part of the dowry of Margaret of Denmark on her marriage to King James III of Scotland. William was not the only grandson of Prince Henry and the last Jarl of the Orkneys. He also had the somewhat particular title of Knight of the Cockle and the Golden Fleece. As Dr. Wallace Murphy points out in his book, The Templar Legacy and the Masonic Inheritance within Rosslyn Chapel, Sir William St. Clair was a member of the secret group that presented important knowledge concerning the Grail, the holy blood of the Merovingian kings, and the destiny of the new continent across the Atlantic. Wallace Murphy speculates that the Knights of the Cockle and the Golden Fleece were the current Grail leader of which Sinclair was possibly a Grand Master. Clearly, the Knights Templar saw themselves as inheritors of ancient knowledge that went back to Atlantis. They struggled for hundreds of years against the Vatican and the Reign of Terror known as the Inquisitions. The Templar, the true church, the one that taught mysticism, reincarnation, and good works, was being suppressed by a dark power that called itself the one true faith. Oppression of these other faiths was done with the familiar device of torture, terror, and extermination. Did the Templars seek to rediscover and recreate Atlantis in America? Henry Sinclair of Orkney had risked it all to make his voyage across the North Atlantic. Had he taken the Holy Grail and possibly even the Ark of the Covenant to America? Had these sacred relics helped spur on the creation of the United States, a land with Masonic founding fathers like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin that create partially on the Templar ideas of religious freedom? According to Templar historians like Michael Baguette, Richard Lee, Andrew Sinclair, and Tom Wallace Murphy, the Knights Templar helped create an independent Scotland, then a new Scotland, and finally an independent United States. So, what of the Knights Templar today? What of them? Well, while Masonry apparently sprang from the Templars, there are other surviving groups. The Knights Templar of Aquarius existed in the 1940s and 50s in England, based in Canfield Gardens, London, and the island of Jersey. The head of the order was an Englishman named H.C. Randall Stevens. Randall Stevens wrote several curious books, including one titled The Chronicles of Osiris, and another entitled Atlantis to the Latter Days, which was published in 1954. In this rare book, Randall Stevens discusses various topics, including Atlantis, the Great Pyramid, King Solomon's Temple, and the Knights Templar. Recent conspiracy literature has painted a dark portrait of modern-day Masons, often putting the blame of the Orwellian nightmare New World Order squarely on the soldiers of the Masonic conspiracy. Murderous renegade Masonic groups like the infamous P2 organization in Italy have made world headlines. The fact that many influential businessmen are also Masons is also seen as part of an exclusive club of puppet masters. My own opinion is that while the Masons were a powerful political group 200 years ago, their significance in modern power struggles is probably overrated. Furthermore, their doctrine are highly misunderstood, especially by fundamentalist Christians. Knights Templar of their day and the Revolutionary War Masons of their day were freethinkers who rebelled against any artificial thought control or economic controls forced upon them by the controllers. The Knights Templar lost their final battle and escaped en masse to Scotland and possibly the New World. The Revolutionary War Masons of British-Scottish descent and the Rosicrucians of German and Dutch descent succeeded in defeating the British crown and fending off encroachment from the Vatican in the form of Spain at the same time. Power struggles between religious, racial, and political factions have occurred since the beginning of history. History records that the Knights Templar and later the Masons stood for philosophical and political freedom. It is difficult to believe that the founding fathers of America, virtually all members of secret societies linked to the Knights Templar, were trying to set up a nation that was meant to be led into a new world order police state. Rather, they were attempting to set up a nation with special safeguards against such a possibility. The checks and balances, guarantees of freedom and inalienable rights are part of the plan for a true nation under God, a utopian society where all citizens live in peace and freedom. Yet let us not be fooled. There is Christ and there is the Antichrist. There is the Buddha and the anti-Buddha. There is the Novus Ordo Secularum and there is the anti-Novus Ordo Secularum. All prophecies remind us that the golden age once existed in the past. A new golden age is soon to come in the future. So what shall we call this new era of light? According to arcane lore, many of the prophets, as well as the Templars, earth changes will destroy many lands, including Europe, while new lands will rise in the Atlantic and Pacific. New countries created by new pioneers will settle these new lands. These same people will be escaping the devastation happening in those countries. Perhaps a new golden age is still to come, occurring on a land that is not yet present. So perhaps this is going on. And that was David Hatcher Chavez excerpt of his Knights Templar, titled "The Amazing Knights Templar."
They are amazing.
They did achieve a certain level of enduring power in popular consciousness. You know, they left such an indelible mark on history that they are even part of video games. You know?
Sure.
So I think you've got movies about, TV series and movies about these kind of like time periods.
God, it was a rough time to live, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I just don't know how you'd make it through half the stuff they went through.
That's what they did. I mean, you gotta make it. You gotta make it. Gotta make it. Gotta make it another day. Tomorrow's gonna be a better day.
Right? They were all some tough sons of bitches, though.
Yeah, definitely had to be. Definitely had to be.
I think Brother Malachi was saying some stuff in the chat there to you. I don't know if you had a chance to catch up on it or not.
No. So from here, I have an article from December 29th of 2019 from AncientOrigins.net, a blog I plug all the time because I think they're good and you should check them out. Let me see. Let me just see something real quick right here.
Okay.
Okay, this article was originally published under the title "The Knights Templar, Still Loved by Conspiracy Theorists 900 Years On" by Patrick Masters. It was originally published on The Conversation. It has been republished under a Creative Commons license. Okay. So let's get into this.
Right.
Head first. Dive in.
Dive in, Pete.
On Christmas Day, 1119, the King of Jerusalem, Baldwin II, persuaded a group of French knights, led by Hugh de Payne II, to save their souls by protecting pilgrims traveling the Holy Land, and so the Order of the Knights Templar was formed. The Revolutionary Order of Knights lived as monks and took vows of poverty and chastity. But theirs were monks with a difference. They would take up arms as knights to protect the civilians, and using the dangerous roads, of the newly conquered Kingdom of Jerusalem. From these humble beginnings, the Order would grow to become one of the premier Christian military forces of the Crusades. Over the next 900 years, these warrior monks would become associated with the Holy Grail, the Freemasons, and the occult. Are any of these associations true? Or are they all just baseless myth? The Crusades ended in 1291 after the Christian capital of Acre fell to the Mameluke forces of Egypt. The Templars found themselves redundant. Despite their wealth and European holdings, their reason for existence had been to wage war in defense of the country. But the French King Philip IV was in debt to the Templar Order, the Holy Land lost, capitalized on the vulnerability, and the Templars arrested in France on Friday, October the 13th, 1307, with a dawn raid on their Paris Templar residence. In 1312, the order was abolished in favor of the Crown. In 1314, the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake in Paris with 3 other Templars. The order destroyed any surviving former members joining the order. Despite the arrest and charges of heresy being laid against the order, a document known as the Chinon Parchment was found in 2001 in the Vatican archives, which documents that the Templars were in fact exonerated by the Catholic Church in 1312. Despite clearing them of heresy, Pope Clement ordered that they be disbanded. Suppression of the Templars meant there was nobody to sit on their legacy. Since then, the order has been incorporated by other organizations, most notably as ancestors to the Masonic Order in the 18th century, and more recent by right-wing extremist groups such as the Knights Templar UK and mass murdering terrorist Andrew Brecken. The Knights Templar association with Freemasonry is not so much a myth as it was a marketing campaign in the 18th century Freemasons to appeal to the aristocracy. Historian Frank Sinello explained in his 2003 book, The Knights Templar, God's Warriors, the Devil's Bankers, that initially it was Andrew Ramsay, a senior French Freemason of the era, who first made the link between the Freemasons and the Crusader Knights. But he originally claimed the Freemasons were descended from the Crusading order of the Knights Hospitallers. Of course, the Hospitallers were still operational, unlike the Knights Templar. So Ramsay quickly changed his claim to the Templars being Freemasons' crusading ancestry. The Knights Templar had actually been mythologized in popular culture as early as the 13th century in the Grail epic Parzival by German knight and poet Wolfram von Eschenbach. In this Grail epic, the Knights Templar were included in the story as guardians of the Grail. After the Order's sudden fall, these warrior monks became associated with conspiracies and the occult. For some, a mystery still surrounds the fate of the Templar fortune, which was in reality seized by Philip IV. With the majority of their property redistributed to the Hospitallers, and the Templar confessions extracted under torture, to worshipping an idol dubbed Baphomet. The link between the Templars and the occult would resurface again in the 16th century in Henry Agrippa's book, De Occulte Philosophia. Modern fiction continues to draw upon widespread mysteries and fanciful theories. These mythical associations are key themes for many popular works of fiction, such as Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, in which Templars guard the Grail. Templar myth has also found its way into the digital gaming format in the globally successful Assassin's Creed franchise, in which the player must assassinate a villainous Templar. 9 centuries after they were formed, Templars remain one of the most iconic and infamous order of knights from the Crusades. The Templar legacy has grown far beyond their medieval military role, and the name has become synonymous with the occult, conspiracies, the Holy Grail, and the Freemasons. These are all false narratives, fantastical or misleading. The real legacy of the Grail of the Templars remains with the Portuguese Order of the Knights, Ordem de dos Caballeros de Nosso Senhor Jesus Cristo, Order of the Knights of Jesus Christ. This order was created by King Dinitz in 1319 with papal permission due to the prominent role the Templars played in establishing the Kingdom of Portugal. A new knighthood even moved into the Templars' former headquarters at Toulon. For historian Michael Haig, the new order was the Templars under another name, but it pledged obedience to the King of Portugal and not the Pope like their Templar predecessors. And so the essence of the Templar successors still exists as the Portuguese Order of Merit for outstanding service. The Templar myth continues to provide a rich source of inspiration for artistic endeavors. There you go. So you guys think the Templar survived? I think they did.
Sure.
I think the Templar survived.
Yeah. That's one game I always wanted to play too, was that Assassin's Creed. I have it, I just never started it.
Yeah.
Have you played it, Pete?
I played a couple of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Last one I played had pirates in it.
Pirates, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I ever even opened the game up yet. I think it's still wrapped up, brand new. But one I will play eventually.
So I think the Templars, I think they did survive. I think that there's something to be said about the ideas linking them with the Oak Island money pit.
Frameshift drive charging.
Hell yeah. Assassin's Creed games were heavily based on that.
As far as the movie Braveheart, was that pretty factual, or was that all Hollywooded up?
Oh, that was hella Hollywooded.
Okay.
Yeah. Like,
I mean,
well, yeah. Look up the real story of William Wallace sometime, and you'll be like, wait, how the did they get that movie out of that?
Okay. Well, it's
Be
just
like-
like the other one too with
Bullshit.
Crow.
Duct tape.
what's his name? He played. Was it Noah? What does he play?
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I saw that one where he played Noah, built the ark and everything.
I hadn't seen that yet either.
You were eating what was that, monatomic gold? Because they live 800 years or something like that.
Well, it's like Pete mentioned in another stream how what was the fallen angels, Nephilim were like rock people or something, right? And they were helping him out. Was that it?
Yeah.
I don't think the fallen angels helped out Noah.
No, they were like, you need to get your people on here. And these ones are gonna die because you're all vegans and they eat animals. So.
I seen a meme the other day, and it had cauliflower, and it's just something like messing with the vegans, and the cauliflower was shaped like a sheep, you know. It was really cute. They had carved it up to make it look just like a little sheep standing there, messing with the vegan. I know. Thought it was funny though.
Yeah, I'm like, look, I would look at anybody and be like, look, the horrible reality about being alive in the universe is, go look at your teeth. You have to eat a little bit of everything.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the telltale thing.
For chemical context, so your body runs right, you have to eat a little bit of everything.
Yeah, that's all we got. Incisors and flat molars, you know.
Right, it's a shitty deal, but deal with it.
You're right, though. You're exactly right. Look at the teeth.
Hey, you know what? I will say this: when you look at the rest of the animal kingdom and nature, and our own history as a species, it's better to be the apex predator and feel guilty about having a full belly rather than being dead and being what's in the full belly.
Starved to death. Yeah, exactly. The strong survive.
System scan complete.
Better to be the eater than the eaten.
That's true. Very well said.
Frameshift drive.
Yeah,
charging.
David, I probably... he's talking about playing the Assassin's Creed. Yeah, I want to. It's just the time I get engrossed in these games, and that's all I do then. I got the Switch though, and started playing Zelda, so I got stuck on that for quite a while. I'm like a teenage boy. My video
Oh, I hear it.
I do too. What's he you got? What you got, Pete? Probably one of them, nah, he's drinking a lot of soda lately.
It's sugar water.
Complete.
Sugar water.
Yeah.
Make me feel good.
I gotta say, I had a little bit of a Mountain Dew throwback. I split one with my cousin today. And you know what?
Fuck was
You
that,
can't
dog?
find the damn things. They are on such back order. Mountain Dew throwbacks. Actually, it's called Mountain Dew Real Sugar now. You can't find them. And they've been like out of stock for a month. But that's good. The Mountain Dew Real Sugar ones, they're good. They don't taste like, I think the new stuff tastes like, I don't know, window cleaner, what you'd imagine window cleaner would taste like. But it's good. Not good for you, but it tastes good. Or your teeth. Speaking of teeth,
Dennis Martin. Dennis Martin says, some of the allegations leveled against the Templars were too bizarre not to contain some amount of truth.
yeah.
Instead, they worshipped a talking head. Now, this makes me think of a particular story about a pope named Sylvester the First,
Okay.
and he had like a brazen head.
Huh. What is that?
It was a bronze head
Oh, okay.
that would talk on its own
System scan
and tell the
complete.
future.
Sounds rather demonic.
Yeah, he had a brazen head.
And that's what they call a bronze head, is a brazen head?
A brazen head, yeah. It was
Okay.
a brazen head,
Wow.
and it would talk. And it was an
Cool.
automaton. It was like a robot head.
How creepy.
Yeah.
I have not heard that story.
Sugar water. I love my sugar water.
Get that sugar water. Get that sugar water.
Take this kidneys. Take that liver. Flush this through till you get stones. Go give yourself
Sugar water.
stones.
Gonna rot your teeth out too.
Ah, fuck it. You don't need them when you get older. That's what dentures are for.
That's right.
Get you some of that poly grip and you're good to go.
Polygrip now.
Pretty poly grip, that's right.
Frameshift drive charging.
That's right.
So, I do want to see, I want to get some info on these brazen heads.
Yeah, please. Yeah. I want to hear more about that guy. That sounds interesting. Would you say he was a pope?
Sylvester, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, Sylvester? The Archbishop Tweety in there somewhere?
Fuel scooping complete.
I think it was Sylvester the Second.
Pretty dead.
Okay, yeah.
I did.
Yeah, it was Sylvester the Second. He was the one who had the brazen head.
Okay.
Gerber was supposed to have had built a brazen head. This robotic robotic head would answer his questions with a yes or no. He was also reputed to have had a pact with a female demon called Meridiana, who appeared after he had been rejected by his earthly love, with whose help he managed to ascend to the papal throne. Another legend tells that he won the papacy playing dice with the devil. According to legend, Meridiana, with a bronze head, told Gerber if he should ever read Mass in Jerusalem, the devil would come for him. Gerber then canceled a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. But when he read Mass in the Church of San Croce de Jerusalem, the Holy Cross of Jerusalem in Rome, he became sick soon afterwards, and dying, he asked his cardinals to call up his body and scatter it across the city. In another version, he was even attacked by the devil while he was reading Mass, and the devil mutilated him and gave his gouged out eyes to the demons to play with in the church.
Damn.
Repenting, Sylvester II then cut off his hand and his tongue.
Ew.
God damn.
It's fucking brutal, Pete.
That's metal as fuck, dude.
You got that right, Fed. Damn. Shit.
Oh, I didn't even talk about the part where he was like studying mathematics and astronomy in the
Okay.
Muslim cities of Cordoba and Seville, and he
Okay.
was accused of learning sorcery. He was supposedly in possession of a book of spells stolen from an Arab philosopher in Spain. He fled, pursued by the victim, who could trace the thief by the stars. But Gerbert was aware of the pursuit, and he hid, hanging from a wooden bridge, where, suspended between heaven and earth, he was invisible to the magician.
Huh.
So, like, he was stealing books of sorceries as, you know, as a youth.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the end, he's cutting out his own tongue and shit. The inscription on his tomb reads, I'm going to skip the Latin and just give it to you in English.
Okay.
This place will yield to the sound of the last trumpet. The
Okay.
limbs of buried Sylvester II at the advent of the Lord. Misread as will make a sound. It has given rise to a curious legend that his bones will rattle in the tomb just before the death of a pope. The alleged story of the crown and papal legate authority given to Stephen I of Hungary by Sylvester in the year 1000, hence the title the Apostolic King, is noted by the 19th century historian Louis L. Kopf as a possible forgery of the 17th century. Likewise, the 20th century historian Zoltan J. Krostozinski
System scan complete.
says that it seems more than likely that Rome would have acted in fulfilling Stephen's request for a crown without the support or approval of the emperor. Yeah, Sylvester the Second. That was Pope Sylvester. He had the brazen head.
Damn. I told you it was demonic as fuck.
The brazen head was a legendary automaton in the early modern period, whose ownership was ascribed to late medieval scholars such as Roger Bacon, who developed a reputation as wizards. It was made of brass or bronze. The male head was variously mechanical or magical, like Odin's head of Mimir in Norse paganism. It was reputed to be able to answer correctly any question put to it, although it was sometimes restricted to yes or no answers. In the 17th century, Thomas Brown considered them to be misunderstanding of the scholar's alchemical work, while in modern times, Borlick argues they came to serve as a metonym for the hubris of Renaissance intellectuals and artists. Idris Shah devotes a chapter of his book, The Sufis, to providing an interpretation of this head of wisdom, as well as the phrase making a head, stating that at its source, the head is none other than a symbol of the Sufic completed man. Medieval Arabic poetry has references to brazen horses that could fly swiftly enough to traverse the world in less than a day, disappearing and reappearing upon command, and describing the Trojan horse as having been one of their ilk. It is likely these accounts had their origins in the allegorical treatments of alchemy and in early machines whose owners pretended to have given them life or speech. They may also have found inspiration in the Greek legends concerning Talos, the brass guardian of Minoan Crete. The first account of a talking head used to give its owner answers to questions appears in William Malmesbury's 1125 History of English Kings, in a passage where he collects various rumors surrounding the polymath Pope Sylvester II, who was said to have traveled to Al-Andalus and stole a tome of secret knowledge, whose owner was only able to escape through demonic assistance. He was said to have cast the head of a statue using his knowledge of astrology. It would not speak until spoken to, but when answered, yes and no questions put to it. The Roman poet Virgil, in his medieval role as a sorcerer, was credited with creating his own ocular head in the Gutierrez de Metz's 1245 Image from the World. The 1319 Renaud Le Contrefait retold this story and may have been the first to specify the head was made of brass. The heads were sufficiently ascribed to several of major figures of the 12th and 13th century Renaissance, who introduced Europe to Arabian editions of Aristotelian logic and science, as well as the Muslims' own work on mathematics, optics, and astronomy. These included Robert Grotziesel, Albert Magnus, and the most famous Roger Bacon. Gross TST was said to have constructed a head of brass to make foretell of such things as befell over the course of 7 years, but then lost it through a 30 seconds neglect. Its relics were supposedly held in a vault under Lincoln College. Reports that Albertus Magnus had a head with a human voice and breathed a certain reasoning process bestowed by Cacodemon, an evil spirit or demon, eventually gave way to stories he had built the entire automaton, who was so overly talkative that his student Thomas Aquinas destroyed it for continually interrupting his train of thought. Bacon, with the help of Friar Bungay, or Bungay, was said to have spent several years building one of the devices to discover whether or not it would be possible to render Britain impregnable by ringing it with a brass wall. They only succeeded in their work once they completed the assistance of a demon. Like Gross TST before them, however, they were said to have missed the decisive moment, either from forgetfulness or exhaustion. Having missed it, their head either collapsed or exploded, or was scrapped as useless. Other people reputed to have brazen heads include Bothelius, Faust, Arnelius de Villanova, Stephen of Tours, Enrique de Villanova. A brazen head also appears in surviving chronicles, the Carolingian Valentine and the Nameless, where it reveals the pair's royal origin in a necromancer's lair in Claremont Castle. Despite the age of the base story, however, the earliest surviving copies date to the 15th century. It is thought to have been the basis for the lost Elizabethan drama. Hero of Alexandria wrote 2 books about steam, water air-powered devices, the Pneumatica and the Automata. They were known to medieval Islamic science and reappeared in the Europe during the 12th and 13th century Renaissance. The talking skull of Bellissimo was a mechanical illusion of the Viennese magician Josefi. The skull was made of painted copper inserted with real human teeth, answering questions by turning or clicking its lower jaw. Yeah, so looks like brazen heads have appeared in lots of movies and books. More books than anything else.
I guess.
Yeah, but it basically is a, brazen head.
It makes me think of that movie Sin City. The guy was dead and his head was still talking. Well, he was still talking. For some reason, I think of that movie.
Brazen head.
Creepy stuff. Demonic shit.
You know what though? He listened.
Yeah, right, Ben?
It definitely got his attention.
You got that right.
He's like, okay, now that you've sufficiently dropped mud and you're realizing this is happening.
Drop mud.
Now that we have your full undivided attention.
Right? No doubt about that. That's funny.
Cello Mecca, how do you do?
Hey.
Jello.
Hello.
Hey, Mecca. Hey.
I'm alive. Barely.
You better be. Where's my Mecca? Damn it.
I got a couple super chats here to get to. Australian $5 for Perth Fence. Thank you, Perth Fence. Much appreciated. Do you think the Knights Templar became or had something to do with the biggest company on earth, the East India Trading Company, which still exists? I absolutely do. I think that they were running the same routes. One was really laid the foundation for the other. These trade routes were ancient, and you had to figure they were well established from the time of the Magi, who had trade routes up and down, perhaps as far away as Great Britain. Mm-hmm. So I do think there could be something to that, and that's something to actually look into, the mysteries of the East India, trading company, because there's definitely something there.
That'd be interesting, yeah.
I'm gonna jot that down in my little notebook.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, East Indian
Trading.
Trading Company.
Just trying not to crunch on Mike. I'm finally getting around to having dinner, quote unquote. Raisin bran. Yay.
I had raisin bran tonight too. It was delicious.
Isn't it good?
I loved it. I had too much of it. I just pounded it down. It was great.
I didn't have that much left.
Bowl after bowl.
Just little bits, beautiful, dried up sunshine right in your mouth.
David Morris for £5. Thank you, David Morris. Much appreciated. David Morris says, today I begin the defeat of the Illuminati. Well, there we go, David. More power to you. The pen is mightier than the sword. I knew they'd get thrown under the bus by their servants. Yes. Yes, David Morris. Well, you get out there and you defeat the Illuminati, buddy. You know, some people take the fight to the bad guys, and you're doing it. You're doing it right. So, fucking A. Fucking A right.
Fucking A right.
Get all up in it.
And thank you again. So yeah, I would like to look into that. The Knights Templar and the East India Trading Company. East India Trading Company is in itself very interesting.
Maybe we could do that tomorrow, huh?
We'll see. We'll see what we end up doing tomorrow.
I think my cat fell in the trash can. Be right back.
I can't be good for the cat.
I know, hang on.
So as an aside here, I've never heard of this term before, the Cacao Demon. It's an evil spirit or a demon. The opposite of a Cacao Demon is a Agatho Demon, or a Eudemon, a good angel or spirit. The word Cacao Demon comes from the Latin through the ancient Greek, meaning evil spirit, whereas daemon would be a neutral spirit in Greek. It is believed they are capable of shapeshifting. In psychology, cacodemia is a form of insanity in which the patient believes they are possessed by an evil spirit. The first known occurrence of the word cacodemon, dates to 1593. In William Shakespeare's Richard III, Act 1, Scene 3, Queen Margaret calls Richard a cacodemon for his foul deeds and manipulations. In John Fletcher's The Knight of Malta, Noradine calls Montferrat, the play's villain, a cacodemon in the final scene. In the Arbatal de Magi Virturum, written in 1557, the word cacodemon is described as one of the seven. In astrology, the 12th house was once called a cacodemon for its association with evil. So, yeah. New word for me, everybody. That's a new word for everybody tonight, cacodemon.
Cacodemon.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Never heard of that one before. It is
I only ever heard it on a Deicide album once.
Yeah, I've never heard that one before. So it's a brand new one for me. Deicide.
Man, that takes me back.
So it looks like
You alright, buddy? My cat did fall in the trash can. I have to shut the lid. Keep hearing all this racket behind me. Surprised you guys couldn't hear it too. You okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, better now? I think every time he jumped, it kept giving out from underneath him. Anyways,
That's what happens when you get in the kitty crap.
yeah.
I wanted to talk about the charges that were lodged against the Templars in the end. There were 5 of them, 5 initial charges lodged against them. The first was the renouncement and spitting on the cross during the initiation into the order.
Jeez.
The second was stripping of the man to be initiated, and thrice kissing of that man by the preceptor on the navel, posteriors, and the mouth. The third was telling the neophyte, the novice, that unnatural lust was lawful and indulged in commonly. The fourth was that a cord worn by the neophyte day and night was consecrated by wrapping it around an idol in the form of a human head with a great beard, and that this idol was adored in all chapters. The fifth was the priest of the order did not consecrate the host in celebrating Mass. So consequently, the charges would be increased and would become, according to the procedures listing of Articles 86 to 127, in which would be added a few other charges, such as prohibition to priests who do not belong to the order. The incontrovertibility of the evidence that the Templar priest did not mutilate the words of consecration in the Mass is furnished by Cypriot proceedings by Ecclesiastes, who had long dwelt with them in the East. Ecclesiastics. Debate continued as to whether the accusations of religious heresy had merit by the standard of their time. Under torture, some Templars admitted to sodomy and the worship of heads and an unknown idol known as Baphomet. Their leaders later denied these admissions, and they were executed. Some scholars, such as Malcolm Barber, Helen Nicholson, and Peter Partner, discount these as forced admissions typical during medieval inquisitions. The majority of the charges were identical to other people being tortured by the Inquisitions, with one exception: head worship. Templars were specifically charged with worshipping some type of severed head, a charge which was made only against Templars. The depictions of the head allegedly venerated by the Templars were varied and contradictory in nature. Quoting Norman Cohen, some describe it as having 3 faces, others as having 4 feet, others as being simply a face with no feet. For some it was a human skull embalmed and encrusted with jewels. For others it was carved out of wood. Some maintained it came from the remains of a former Grand Master of the Order, while some were equally convinced it was Baphomet. Some saw it as having horns. Barbers linked this charge to medieval folklore about magical heads, and the popular medieval belief that Muslim worshipped idols. Some argued it referred to rituals involving the alleged relics of John the Baptist, Euphemia, one of the Ursula's 11 maidens, and or Hughes de Paynes, rather than pagan idols. The charges of heresy included spitting, trampling, or urinating on the cross while naked, being kissed obscenely by the receptor on the lips, navel, and the base of the spine, heresy and worship of idols, institutionalized sodomy, and also accusations of contempt of the Holy Mass and denial of the sacraments. Barbara Frail and the suggestions of the acts were intended to simulate the kind of humiliation and torture that a crusader might subject to if captured by the Saracens. According to this line of reasoning, they were taught how to commit apostasy with the mind only and not with the heart. The accusations of venerating Baphomet is much more problematic. Karen Rails has noted, there's no mention of Baphomet either in the Templar rule or in other medieval periods Templar documents. The late scholar Hugh J. Schoenfeld speculated that the captains of the Knights Templar created the term Baphomet through the Atbash cipher to encrypt the Gnostic term Sophia, Greek for wisdom, due to the influence of the hypothetical Quran Messene scrolls, which may have been found during the archaeological digs in the Kingdom of Jerusalem.
Frameshift drive charging.
Marco Escondolas, thank you very much. $5, much appreciated. I know the world has been upside down when I tuned in a creepy little book to feel normal. Well, we're glad to hear it, Marco.
We are, Marco.
This is where you don't worry about the world. We're talking about other crazy things.
That's right.
Just leave the world at the door.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Like, yeah, is it kind of messed up to... No, it's actually not. This is like a refuge. This feels actually like more normal.
I know. That's right.
Don't let anybody bully you into escape and into not going for escapism if you need it. You know, if you need to take a couple minutes to read a book or turn off the TV or mute a hashtag on Twitter or something, yeah, don't feel... Because I've had people bullying me about it. I'm like, I don't want to hear about current events.
Yeah, who wants to hear about any of that? I don't know.
So I haven't been watching the news or
I don't
nothing.
know,
Yeah, I'm tired of it.
I don't think people tune in to hear about that, and I don't want people to come here and hear me talk about that.
No.
That's not what we do.
That's why we're
So,
here.
on that note, we are coming up upon the hour-and-a-half mark. So I gotta wrap things up and get my dusty,
Beauty rest.
tired old bones to bed because I gotta be up early.
Gotta get your beauty rest.
But I do
Work on that
appreciate you all
mustache.
being here with us night after night, day after day, as we delve into the world of the weird. I want to say thank you so much to DeRaid's Lunatic, Red Monarch, Perth Fence, David Morris, and Marco Esquindolas for generous super chats. They're much appreciated. Never expected, but always appreciated. Thank you, my panel, for being here tonight. Guys, check out the description of this video where you'll find links to my Twitter and my email. Teespring store, there's some great designs you might want to check out there. You might find something you like. The Patreon, thank you, my Patreon supporters. And if you're in a position to become a Patreon supporter for just $1 a month, that's $1 a week. That's less than the price of a cup of coffee. Please consider signing on up. I do appreciate it. Links to everybody else's channel are down in the description of this video. Don't forget to subscribe. And as we do, this has been a Creepy Little Book Live, and you've been listening to High Strangeness, the #1 late-night paranormal podcast on YouTube. I've been your host, Pete. With me tonight were digitally modified organism, Mecha Random 42, and Tina Tomazinski. Until tomorrow night, everybody, stay creeped out.
System scan complete. Frameshift drive charging. Four, three, two, system scan complete. Frameshift drive charging. Four, three, two, one. Frameshift drive charging. Frameshift drive charging. Four, three, two, system scan complete. Fuel scooping. Fuel scooping complete. Frameshift drive charging. Four, three, two, fuel scooping. Fuel scooping complete. System scan complete. Surface scanned by 50%. Surface scan complete.